Assistant professor at the Department of Art History and Aesthetics in MS University, Baroda. He did his BA in History from Calcutta University and his post-graduation from the MS University. He is a fellow of the American Institute of Indian Studies and the Institute of Advanced Studies in Edinburgh University. He is the guest author of the Marg issue on Portuguese and Goa. He is also the guest author for Encyclopedia of Temple Architecture, in which he wrote on Kerala. And he is also the guest author for Encyclopedia of World Sculpture, published from Routledge, New York, in which the Indian portion has been co-authored by Jayaram and Dipanjana. Jayaram is also interested in theatre, and is going to speak on narration today.
Good morning. Very good morning to all of you. I thank the organizers for inviting me to Santiniketan. This is my third visit to Santiniketan and the second official visit. I came long back as an examiner, but I didn't fail anybody, but they never called me again. That's, thanks to Havel also for his 150th birthday. So that's I'm here. And thanks to the students who put me along with the School of Athens, which is there, with my teachers and gurus like Shivji, Parimu, and I'm also happy to see along with Ramkinger Bej and Vinod Bihari Mukherjee and K.G. Subramaniam, Pranamda, Sada Menon. So it's a nice thing, and you have kept me in a nice position just below Parimu and Shivji on the, I'm sitting on the steps. So it's a good idea. Now, see, this particular paper I made because Shaumik has told me right in the beginning there's going to be a interaction with the students, informal interaction with the students. But doesn't look very informal to me because I can see a lot of my teachers there. But anyway, the paper continues in an informal manner. And this paper also had a kind of history. As an art historian, from the thing, introduction, what Sanjay has given the introduction, you must have already got an idea that this guy is more into architecture. And I am proud to say that I am proud to be an architectural historian. We are an endangered species in India. Very few students join art history and do specialization in architecture, and that also in Baroda only, and in Santiniketan, of course, it's not, the specialization is not there as far as I know. And then I was discussing with Shaumik that what should I present on. Maybe on Indian architecture or architectural history of India, the study of architectural history of India. That anyway, my paper and the Havel seminar will be slightly on that line. And then I talked to him that whether I should have a talk on Islamic art, which again we do it in Baroda. I happen to teach the Islamic art portion. Which is also new to you. So, but then he said that would be too specialized art history for the students, and there would be students who are not art history students but are other general students also. So I came to this paper. And the history of this paper is that, I have been always, I never studied miniature painting like, Shaumik and Sanjay when they were there. And I concentrated on architecture, and long back, I think, around 95 or something, we had a departmental seminar and it was on miniature painting, and I was very, very happy about it because I have nothing to do with the miniature thing. So then Dr. Parimo said, no, you have to present a paper. I said, sir, it is on miniature and हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है, so why should I do it? So he said, no, you do. I mean, he gave me a set of plates, the photographs, which happened to be Sohini-Mahiwal. And the only relation I have with Sohini-Mahiwal is that I happen to see the horrendous picture known as Sohini-Mahiwal, this Sunny Deol and dancing around. So I looked at these paintings and I thought just presenting it that way, let me go into that painting. But which kind of surprised me is that all the painting had a specific, what we can say, compositional pattern. Every painting had a specific compositional pattern. So I thought it doesn't look like, whether it is from Abad, whether it is from Guler, whether it is from Bundi, all those schools had a very specific pattern of painting. Pattern doesn't compositional pattern. So I kind of looked into it. Then I thought there may be some relation or some kind of reason why the painter chose to have this kind of composition. Then I kind of reopened this chapter. I presented there and that's it. So I finished with that. Whatever little engagement I had with miniature painting. And last year I opened this paper again because there was a seminar, international seminar on mysticism, Islamic mysticism, which is also known as Sufism. It's Islamic mysticism. And so I thought maybe this paper will fit in there. Then this time I did a bit more research and read into some Sufi, Sufi writings and writings on Indian Sufism, and I am very happy that I came out with the results. But most of these writings, for example, there was a scholar known as Ali Asghani who wrote on Indian Sufism, and those writings are only on literature, not on painting. He never mentions about painting. So this came to another this thing that how you exactly translate a literary text into a pictorial text, and what exactly is happening in the kind of artist's mind. And I don't think it is very. When an artist is painting, like in theatre we say that if you are taking a step, in a particular direction, it has a meaning. And likewise in the case of artists also, if you are making a stroke consciously, unconsciously, it will have a meaning. Or we as art historians have all the freedom to interpret the way we want. In the sense we will have our interpretations. Nobody can stop it. So you have this question that why the artist is choosing a particular composition pattern, or when the artist is looking at it, how he is going to, when he has a story and how he kind of changes the story into, or a verbal narration into a pictorial narration. And last year also I had a workshop with the students in Jaipur. It's international, Indian Institute of Craft and Design. And there I did a workshop with them where this whole question of narration, how you change narration from verbal narration to visual narration. And it was nice exercise, but they gave very good results. But they kind of looked at the story and they were asked to take a story from the library, then work on it and make the sequence, how you exactly make a sequence. And then I asked them to change the sequence into pictorial sequence. Then I said, I will give you one space, just single space, and you put all those narrations into one space. That was something, they had problems. And when you look at a painting or a sculpture or anything like that, this kind of, how you exactly understand that particular thing visually. And this narrative tradition in India, if you look at the Jataka stories or, even Life of Buddha, of course Parimo sir is sitting here, Life of Buddha, he actually worked on this kind of approach of narration in Life of Buddha thing. And so you have, Indian tradition and this narrative tradition, which is very much part of the folk tradition, and there's very much part of even earlier tradition like Charachitra tradition, where, as Dr. Niharanjan Ray has written. So you have this kind of mobile pictures, picture tradition, which is there in the, of course, right outside you have the photo painting being sold, you have a narrator along with that. So, but somehow when it comes to, say, by 5th century, this kind of 6th century, this narrative tradition slowly give away for the iconic tradition. And, then again in modern period, you have this narrative tradition being re-invited by the modern artists. You have Vinod Bihari Mukherjee's medieval saints, and there are a lot of tradition, Nadik Puja, for example, Nandalal Bose. So you have this tradition. So this is basically a kind of look into narrative tradition in India, then taking Sohini-Mahiwal as a case study. So let's have the first slide. Visual tradition is there in sculpture, painting, and painting in case of murals and in miniatures. Then verbal narrations you can see in epics, novels and poems, and of course the folk stories. India has a great tradition of folk stories, and A.K. Ramanujan will have if you read A.K. Ramanujan, you can see that from every corner of India you have fantastic folk stories. Of course, this folk stories has been used by the Sufi saints that will come later. Theatre and film, in many ways, it is a pure, we can have the collapse of what we can say visual and verbal narration. Next one. Narration in the folk level, you have Fat painting from Rajasthan, Pata painting from Bengal, then Paithani, that is Paithani, then Pithora painting. Pithora painting actually painted, I'm sure you heard of Pithora painting? Yeah. It is actually painted when the narrator will be going on talking about or singing about the story, then the painter, when that particular character comes, then he puts the painting. And of course, later he puts helicopters, cycles and buses and trains. That he can do that. There is a freedom. But the story will be basically on that. Then you have this Fat painting. It's a very interesting tradition that you will have it's actually huge curtain-like thing. Then when the narrator will be singing with the Ravan Hatha, he will be going on singing, and there will be one lady, his wife usually, she will be moving around with the diya, and she will show where exactly that character is. Now, of course, it's only happening in marriages in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Nowhere else you can see that. Then Paithani painting is actually one after the other. It's not exactly have that narrative kind of thing. But again, you have this kind of tradition. I'm just going into that. That's it.
Jayaram?
Yeah.
I can't see properly. So that appears to be an Orissa part, rather than Bengal part, no?
Which one?
The top one.
This one? That's Rajasthan. That's
It's not Bengal part.
No, Bengal part I don't have in the picture at all. Because if I show Bengal part here, they will laugh at me because they can see it very much close in quarters. Next one. Now, how you exactly build up a story? In a story, as I said, it's for the students. Ramayana has a nucleus. What is the nucleus of Ramayana? It is Rama killed Ravana. That's it. You have a protagonist, and you have an antagonist, and an action. Rama killed Ravana. And then the whole narration is based on who, when, where, why, how. This thing. Otherwise it is then we can say nucleus of this thing is, Rama killed Ravana. And why Ravana, Rama killed Ravana, then we will have 112 stories that, Sita was kidnapped and that happened, this happened, and all those things. So you have a, nucleus, then the narration actually builds up around it. Next. But in narration itself, you have also a different way of narration. You can have one after the other, in a sequential narration, which is actually, in the case of Ramayana, it is a kind of sequential narration. But in the case of Mahabharata, it is not like that. It is what we can say chain narration. Of course, this is not my observation. This is observed by a Marathi author called Balchandra Namade, who was working on this narrative technique. And he says it is almost like a chain. And Mahabharata, if you are looking at Mahabharata, it is a very interesting thing that, it kind of freezes the time. For example, Arjuna is about to shoot the arrow at Jayaram, then Krishna says stop. So the narration stops there. The whole, movement stops there. And he says, this guy has a vardhan from this, from that one. All stories, what happened to his father, what he did in this life, everything. His biography is given. And then he says, so shoot the arrow in such that his head won't fall down. Then says, okay, start. The narration again starts. Then Arjuna takes the arrow and goes. So it is a very interesting kind of narration which was completely ruined in B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata, which was basically, it was basically one link of the story. But the real fun of Mahabharata is that you'll stop somewhere. Like Yudhishthira tells to Dhaumya that I am the most unfortunate person. Then Dhaumya says, no. Tak, Nala's story comes in or some other story comes in. So, it is a link, it's everything is linked. And then, if you are lucky enough, you can reach to the main link. And Mahabharata also has this element of narrator, that it has two characters talking, then it is said by somebody, so you have Vaishambhayana, who is quoting Shukamuni, who is quoting Vyasa, who is quoting Sanjay. Sanjay is saying, so it's like, by the time we don't know who said what. And in Kadasarisagar, it starts with some Damanaga, some this one, then he says, no, this story is like this. Then the story starts. And by the time we forget the original narrator. So this narration has to have a narrator, but not necessarily you have to depict the narrator. Except in few paintings, I think the narrator doesn't come. But in Bharut, we suppose there was some narrator who was telling the story because it is written underneath, and you will have the first European visitor who went to Ellora. There was one Brahmin, Marathi Brahmin, who was showing him everything. And he didn't understand a word because the Marathi Brahmin spoke in Marathi and this was a Frenchman. Only thing he got is very impressive place, and this guy seems to know a lot of things. That's what he wrote. So you have this narrator who has nothing to do with the whole thing, but So anyway, next one. Now, when you are coming to the visual narration, there are these different narrative techniques. One is episodic, then the space-bound narrative technique, and sequential. Sequential is one which is understood by everybody. Of course, obliques, asterisks, obliques, and that is asterisks, oblique coming to India. That is the episodic one. And space-bound. Usually, Indian tradition usually goes for the space-bound approach. That is Mahakavi Jataka from Bharut. If you don't know it, of course, you must be knowing it. Saying this. Next one. Now, in the story, how the episode is kind of built up. You have a monkey king rescuing his subject. That is the first one. The rock monkey jumping on the monkey king. That is episode number 2. And Raja rescues the falling monkey king. That's there. And monkey king gives a sermon to Raja. Now, when you have a space-bound thing, you can actually repeat the character. Repeat the character in the sense the protagonist is many times repeated. That's not an issue, But the thing is that we should know who the protagonist is, first of all. So the thing is that it's always, I always wonder that if I don't know the story, would I understand this? It's very difficult. And in Bharut, of course, there is this, underneath everything is written, Mahakavi Jataka, whatever the names are given. And that's why I am suspecting a narrator. A Buddhist monk who is getting some money for guiding Bharut, Bharut. Next one. In the case of, say, the thing is that you can have, from this nucleus, there is a nucleus of a story, that you can actually have more, narration into it. The visually also you can actually do that. For example, in Bharut, Sanjay, if you can go back, Bharut doesn't show the, it's slightly show the river. Over here, you can see the river. But in Sanchi, they actually see the, next one, Sanchi, this is Sanchi, stupa number 1. And you can see this river becomes the, major character in it. I remember once Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh gave a talk in Baroda. So he was saying how you enter into a picture, and how you kind of, you have to travel through the picture. I happened to hear the lecture again in Ahmedabad, where he was saying that, how you enter into a miniature and how you travel into that thing. And I think knowing the narration is very important, because then you can enter into the picture and travel along with the story. That would be better. And here you have, as we saw in the other one, the first episode is the king coming and attacking. Then the jumping and the rock monkey and all those things. Then the last sermon is the number 4. Next one. This is the person who painted is right sitting here, Dr. Ratan Parimu. He actually made this sketch in Ajanta. This is Vidura Pandita Jataka. In our Ajanta book, he had written a piece on that, because it is a seminar organized by him. And so you can see this kind of narration, 1, 2, 3, where actually Dr. Parimu says that it is, to find the hero, there is a horse. So you just follow the horse and you find the story. But in the story, what they have done is, Ajanta painters have done is that they divided the space into 2 regions. One is the Naga country and the Kuru country. Very much like our Rajasthani fart painter, who will do Mewad in one area, Marwad in another area, Jodhpur in another area. So whatever happens in Jodhpur will be this thing, and whatever happens in Mewad will be over there. So likewise, whatever happens, doesn't matter the sequence, you will have, these 2 countries kind of divided. But this division is also, this is a physical division you can see, but in the case of Sohini-Mahiwal, it will be different. So I'm kind of going towards that. Next one. This is Shatanta Jataka from Ajanta, earlier than Vidura Pandita Jataka, of course, stylistically and chronologically. And you can see that the starting 1, 2, then it is 3, but 3 is actually starting from the other side, and it kind of comes into that. So it's kind of merges in the middle. Of course, now in Ajanta you can't make out anything with the glass reflection and no light at all. So you have this kind of narration in Ajanta. Ajanta uses lot of narrations like that. Next one. A small narration, like it is only, actually what you are seeing is almost the same size. This is Kapi Jataka, no Mahakapi Jataka. The story is very simple story, that there is a Mahisha comes and a buffalo comes every day, and this monkey, buffalo is the Bodhisattva buffalo, and this monkey is playing with him every day. And then another Mahisha comes, and another buffalo comes, and the monkey starts to do the same prank, and he's kind of kicked that out. Simple thing, because they did not have any big jatakas to finish that, so they have this kind of small stories, which is, so it is interesting that this kind of folk stories, which is floating in the region, has kind of picked up by religions. Like for example, Jataka tales also. There is basically folk tales which is used by Jatakas. And there what they do is that, instead of the protagonist is actually Bodhisattva. So the monkey story, Bodhisattva becomes the monkey, and if it is a happy story, Bodhisattva becomes the happy. Simple. Next. This is another Kapi Jataka. This is how the human beings behave. It's a kind of criticism of the human beings. And you have one monkey rescuing one person. Number 1, you can see the person is human being is kind of fell into a ditch, and the monkey comes and he rescues him. And then the monkey says, I'm going to sleep, so you just, watch me. And then this man tries to kill the monkey. And the monkey gets up and says, what is this, So this is a very small panel in Ajanta. Next one. When it comes to the life of Buddha, you have, this is the 8 feats of Buddha's life. So you have dream of Mayadevi, birth of Buddha, leaving the palace, enlightenment, first sermon, Sravasti record, subjugation of Nalagiri, and Mahaprabhu Nirvana. But in this panel, they didn't exactly put all the narrations. They just put number 2, whatever is highlighted, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. And the 6 is actually creating a complete, panel with miraculous Sravasti. Next one. Then this is the Maravijaya panel or an enlightened panel. Actually, I've written an article on this. It is published in London long back. Maravijaya, it's about the sculptor and all those things. Here you have again one of the protagonists. He's not exactly the protagonist, the antagonist. Protagonist is Buddha, who's in the center. And you have number 1 coming of Mara, then attack with the terrible, then he retreats, that's also Mara. Then attack with the beauty, in the sense Mara Kanya's dance and all those things, as the Buddha Charita says, or Lalita Vistara says, one of the Buddhist texts. Then you have the question on the dana, and then again Mara is related over here. Then you have Buddha touching the earth, Bhumi Sparsha, and saying that, okay, I've done dana in my previous life. I don't want to go into the story. It's a nice story. This is one of the best representation of in sculpture. This is one of the best representation as far as academic. Yeah.
We follow the hand. To palm.
Yep.
So it is not Bhumi Sparsha.
Yeah. Yeah, it is not Bhumi Sparsha in
the story. Excuse me for interrupting.
No problem.
Because we can see it here. The question which in my life of Buddha, I have raised this question that when did the Bhumi Sparsha mudra was invented or was formulated, which is palm downward. This is the dialogue in the text where Mara and Buddha, this is the argument, and one incident is like this. Mara says to Buddha, you have no right to be here. Only one who has given dana, he has the right to be here. He says, in my Visantara Jataka, I have given a lot of dana.
Okay.
This is dana mudra. Referring to that dialogue.
Okay.
And so here the question remains open. When did actual Bhumi Sparsha mudra was formed? So this is referring to that dialogue, done.
Yeah. So you mean to say this is just before he touches the earth and says that you are my witness. It can be, it's one of the interpretation. But I have a feeling that this is touching the Bhumi Sparsha, because in Ajanta, number 1 has all the other Ajanta Maravijayas have this Bhumi Sparsha in the right manner. Only here there is this difference. And it looks like a nice, that's why I like this sculptor. He does a lot of innovations, and it's a kind of, I would say it this way, that it's a kind of mixture of both, or in a sense, merging both the things. And Buddha is always in the Varada, Dana Mudra kind of thing. But see, this is what, a picture is there, you can interpret in the way, you can, each historian actually interprets in a different manner. And it's interesting that, Parimu says that, Sir says that, you, like before this thing. And there is also an issue that here you don't exactly see the Bhumi coming out. Like before the Maravijaya, in my paper I have explained it, this thing, where there are 4 or 5 Maravidyas I have brought in. And the Bhumi, I mean in Gandhara thing, the Bhumi is coming out. You can actually see a lady. And this lady who is jumping up, it can be Bhumi, it can be, as Parivasa himself has said that, one of the Marakanyas started dancing and very vigorously, and she took her cloth off. This is what he said in the life of Buddha. But, I mean, the interpretations can be interesting. Yes, sir.
Jayaram, I just want to add an information to what you have said.
Sure.
There is a take on this Yataka alignment. There is Maravijay. It's not Yataka, it's Maravijay. Done by Nandlal Bose, and it's a big mural that can be seen in China Bhavan, main hall. And it's a take. I mean, it's not a copy of the Maravijaya in Ajanta, which otherwise people know that it's a copy, but it's not exactly a copy. It's a take. That's and that take is very interesting. There too, the mudra is the hand mudra is ambiguous. One can take have a look at that.
Yeah, sure. So, next. Then this is actually Dr. Panu showed in his presentation. This is it's an episodic way, changing of embryo, where Hari Vedamisha comes and meets Indra, then he is leaving and he is coming into. So you have these 3 folios, one after the other, where it is episodic. Next one. But in the Jain itself, you can. So there is no strict rule that you have to follow a particular, visual narration. And you have a space-bound narration here, where, of course, the line is drawn by me. Neminada comes for the marriage, and he hears all these problems of, the slaughtered animals crying, and then he leaves. So he comes and he goes. And you can see 2 Neminadas, but one, the other character. So it is again, what we can say space-bound narration. Next one. In the case of Hindu tradition, or in the sense Brahminical tradition, especially in miniatures, you have, this is subjugation of Kalia, 18th century, I think, Guler or Guler? Yeah, Guler. See? I don't know. Guler, So Kangra or Guler, I'm not sure. So you have 1, 2 and 3. 3 episodes, one after the other. Probably it's all painted together. Next one. But you have again in the same tradition, or same tradition of painting, you have again space-bound narration, where this is Akrura going to Akrura taking Krishna and Balram to Mathura, and he takes a dip in between in a river, and he sees Sheshashai Vishnu underneath. Then he looks up. Then he sees Krishna and Balram sitting on the Ratha. Then he dips down, and again he sees Krishna and Balram. So the repetition of Krishna and Balram, repetition of Akrura. So you have this, again the space-bound narration happening here. Next. Now the crux of the paper, that is understanding visual strategies in Sohini-Mahiwal painting. This is from Awadh, 18th century. You will start getting 18th century onward, this paintings. Next one. Original text is written by Sufi saints that I came to know much later, recently. It is written by Shah Abdul Latif. Not written, but he kind of reinterpreted this particular poem, the folk story of Sohini-Mahiwal in Sindh region. And he used it for the, Sufi mysticism. Actually, they used, one of the author who wrote on Hindi, medieval Hindi literature, he has said that, in medieval period, lot of the Sufi saints used the folk stories which is floating around, and they gave them an interpretation. In the sense, love stories which is happening around or this is floating around, they gave a Sufi interpretation to that. And you have these stories, everybody knows this story. Heer Ranja, then Sasui Punun, Mirza Sahiban, Umar Marui, Mumal Rano, then of course the famous Laila Majnu, and Salim Anarkali story. Of course, there is no written document on Salim Anarkali, and we have no history. It doesn't exactly give any reference to any girl known as Anarkali. But in Lahore there is a building which was the governor's building later, which was actually known as Anarkali's tomb, and we don't know whether that Anarkali is this Anarkali. Anyway. And the story is that Anarkali know right in the beginning that famous Prithviraj Kapoor ka dialogue hai, ye khanis Hindustan ka Mallika nahi ban sakti hai, that kind of thing. She knows about it, but she also knows that it is going to be the end, So in most of these characters have, either one of them will die. Like Heer will, go as a ascetic or mendic. Rancha Rancha Karte Karte. I mean, there is a song also, very popular song recently. So, it's interesting. I mean, actually, one of one student from Visva, we had a discussion yesterday. And I was saying that, in late 90s, or in the sense, early 90s onwards, there is this Sufi is kind of picking up. In music also, popular music. And we just had in Baroda a Sufi music concert by Kavita Seth. We had a kind of Saras copy of Abida Parveen, like that. It was not exactly great. And she was well known for some song she sang, which is very Sufi kind of thing. Anyway, so you have this Sufi element, especially thanks to A.R. Rahman, I think. There are a lot of this Sufi elements coming back. And I'm looking for other representations. Heer Ranja is not represented in miniature painting at all. Sasui Punun, no. Mirza Sahiban, no. Umar Marui, no. Mumal Rano, no. The only one, which is very popular, of course, Laila Majnu is very, 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 in Persian painting and in Mughal you have Laila Majnu represented. And Salim Anarkali is not represented, it's only in the popular, myth. So, but this Heer Ranja, there are these movies, right from, 1930s, you have these movies, black and white movies of Heer Ranja. And Sohini-Mahiwal was twice made. One was with Bharat Bhushan and I think Meena Kumari, I'm not very sure, Meena Kumari. And the other one was popular with Sunny Deol and Poonam Dhillon. So there are these characters which is not there in the poem at all. Some villain character and all those things. Anyway. So you have Sohini-Mahiwal painting from Awadh, Guler and Bundi and a lot of them. Next one. The story of Sohini-Mahiwal in simple, because if you know the story of Sohini-Mahiwal, we can skip this slide. If you don't know, in brief, this is a story about Mirza Izzat Beg. Nobody knows it. We only know him as Mahiwal. Turkestan arrives in village of Punjab in the sense Punjab Sindh, which is now in Pakistan. Izzat Beg meets and falls in love with Sohini, daughter of the village potter Tulla. And Izzat Beg decides to stay back in Sohini village and start pottery business. क्योंकि ये इसकी प्यार के चक्कर में he used to go और जाके pottery खरीदते हैं. वो जो pot खरीदे सब पैसा बर्बाद हो गया तो क्या करेंगे, फिर pot का business शुरू कर दिया, लेकिन he is not interested in the business, so business fails. Then बेचारा क्या करेंगे, so he said it has to be around Sohini's house. So he goes and tells Tulla that I can do the buffalo herding. That's why he is known as Mahiwal. Okay, so he works as a Mahiwal, then nothing happens, Sohini gets married to somebody else. And then he is not interested in Mahiwal's job. So he leaves. After Sohini's marriage, Mahiwal lives and with an ascetic. He lives with an ascetic. This should be underlined for the reason that that is the only time in the story this ascetic comes. But in the representation of Sohini-Mahiwal painting, always ascetic is there. So that is one of the things which clicked, me to think more. Then after Sohini, then Sohini visits the ascetic. Happened to visit the ascetic. And then the both meets again. Then they decide, chalo bhai, we'll have a rando outside the river. On the other side of the river. And interestingly, Sohini. Now this is very interesting. Sohini, not the hero. Heroine takes the steps like take the pot and then she travels through the water with an down pot and she reaches the other side. I asked this question to somebody who knows about Urdu and all those things. So I asked him, "Ki Mahiwal kyun nahi hil raha hai?" So he said, no, Mahiwal had an accident. मैंने फिर से जाके सोहिनी-माहिवाल पूरा पढ़ा, जो भी ट्रांसलेशन गिवन, कोई एक्सीडेंट हमें कुछ मालूम ही नहीं है. Okay, so anyway, so she is actually traveling. Okay, so this happens for a long time. Then Sohini's sister-in-law, underline Sohini's sister-in-law, she is the main villain of the story. Interestingly, miniature painter doesn't want to put any villain in the story, so they don't show her at all. So she discovers the secret, and then one fine morning, bad night, stormy night, the river is in complete, torrential rains happening, and Miss Sohini or Mrs. Sohini wants to go to the other side. And the sister-in-law, on that particular day, she changes the kacha pot into a pakka pot. Pakka pot into a kacha pot. Okay. So she replaces a unfired pot there. Sohini, who has lived in her father's house, potter's daughter, who can see kacha into pakka from a distance of at least 1 kilometer, she picks up a kacha pot and jumps into the river. And of course, what happens? Kacha pot dissolves, and Sohini, who dared to, swimming is not something which is, pot hai, nahi hai, koi farak nahi padta hai, but anyway, she cannot swim and she is jumping, jumping in the sense she was drowning and she is crying. And what Mr. Mahiwal do? He jumps into the river and both dies. This is the story. Okay? Hearing Sohini and Nizad Beg jumps into the river only to join Sohini in the eternal journey to the death. Next. Now, we have made, I made some made into segments, and there are decisions. Nizad Beg decides to stay back. That's very important because it changes his position in the next segment. And Tulla decides to marry Sohini to this one. So that also changes Mahiwal's position in the next segment. He becomes, from Nizad Beg, he becomes staying back, he becomes, of course, he's in Nizad Beg only. Then he becomes Mahiwal because he wants to stay in the thing. Then lovers meet, Tulla decides to marry off Sohini to the fellow potter's son. So it becomes Mahiwal, Nizad Beg, the Mahiwal, is changes into Nizad Beg, the ascetic, or in the sense, Chela of an ascetic. Then they decides to meet. Again, Nizad Beg, the ascetic, becomes Nizad Beg, the lover. Then sister-in-law decides. Then Sohini decides to cross the river, and Nizad Beg decides to. There are decisions made, and this decision actually changes the position of the hero and the heroine of the story. Based on that, I made the decision making as blocks, and I called the other one as the positions are pools. So I divided them as pools and blocks. It's just for the convenience. There is no art historical rule that you have to follow pool and block. It's just name and game. Next. This is the characters of Sohini-Mahiwal, major ones. Nizad Beg, Sohini, Tulla, ascetic, sister-in-law, Sohini's husband. Sohini's husband, nowhere in the picture. Sister-in-law, who actually made Sohini jump into the river, or the reason for her death, is never shown. In miniatures, they are not interested. And ascetic, what is the story says? Mahiwal was staying with an ascetic. That's it. Uska naam bhi nahi hai, kya ascetic hai, kuch malum nahi hai. But ascetic is always represented. Mahiwal is always represented, usually as Krishna, because it is in Konda. And we always see Sohini swimming. Doesn't matter what miniature, she never walks, she always swims. Next. Yeah, see this? So you have in the composition always ascetic on this side, smoking, non-smoking, whatever. Then on the other side, Mahiwal sitting, like here it is almost like a Mahiwal, but later he, in Kota he becomes Buddhi, he becomes Slender Krishna. Now the interesting thing is, when she is swimming across, he is not a Mahiwal. और ये भैंसे उधर क्या कर रहा है कुछ आइडिया नहीं है, So then he is not even, and the thing is that he is staying with the ascetic. But what is Sohini doing? She is going from the bank of ascetic to the other side. So this is not exactly going according to the story. So I thought there was some funny, fishy thing happening. Next one. That's again, that is Awadh. Both from Awadh. And interestingly, the way the ascetic is sitting is basically how they show the Sufi saints. Shah Latif is actually shown like that, in one of the miniatures which is there. I don't have the picture today. Next one. This is what a modern illustration will do. What is the illustration? Sohini, that Kachapot is dissolving, and Sohini is crying aloud, and the sister-in-law is watching. And Mahiwal is coming, there is no Mahiwal, there is no bhais, nothing. It is the last sequence of the picture, which we are used to. Okay? In modern tradition. But the miniature painters doesn't go anything like that. Next one. So, all Sohini-Mahiwal miniature painting follow one specific character, that is Mahiwal, Sohini and ascetic. Specific narrative junction. It is not the last sequence as you see in the modern thing. The sequence is segment number 10, that Swami and Sohini decides to cross the river to be with Mahiwal. So in the river reaches the other side bank, Kachapot dissolves and water drowning Sohini. That is the last one. Ijab jumping holding it. Then specific pattern. Always Mahiwal will be on top, Sohini in the middle within the water, and ascetic on the side. Next one. Now, based on this, I made this structure block, pool block, like that. And then when you interpret it further, based on the Sufi text, I could find out that the pool 1 actually represents love, pool 2 represents suffering, pool 3 represents dejection, pool 4 represents ephemeral union, that is, temporal union, and the last one, that is pool 5, eternal union. Now, if you take it further into the philosophy, I do not go into the philosophy of Sufism here. There are a lot of people written on. Ali Asnani has gone into it, and there is Mr. White who has written on it. This paper I am going to give to that student who was doing on Sufism. So, if you want, you can go through it. It talks about world of love and relation, which is known as Nasut in Sufism. Then world of suffering is also known as Nasut. Then the world of dejection is Jabrut. Then world of ephemeral happiness is Malkamat. And ultimate truth and the happiness, the world of ultimate truth and happiness, that is eternal union. When you become one with Allah, it is Lahut. Now, the thing is that Sohini visits the ascetic, then she starts moving towards Mahiwal. Now, in Sufism and Bhakti poetry, you have this Viraha aspect, especially in Indian Sufi poetry. In Persian Sufi poetry, you don't get exactly this Viraha aspect, and most of the scholars actually believe that it is because of the relation with the Bhakti movement in India, where you have this kind of Viraha, and the individual soul is always considered to be the Virahini or the female, and the eternal soul is always considered to be the Paramatma, is always considered to be the God. So, you have in the case of Bhakti poetry, you have this element. And the ascetic comes very interestingly. There is a quote by Kabir. He says that I was entangled in this world. That Murshid is basically the teacher. Murshid disentangled me. So when you meet the Murshid, you start thinking about your future and you start thinking about the salvation. But the salvation is not achieved for an individual soul. Like in the case of Hinduism, you can actually, after getting salvation, you can go up, if you want. But in Sufism, it is not allowed. You have to, there is no system except Prophet Muhammad going to heaven for a while and coming back. Otherwise, nobody has permitted to go like that. So, to be with Allah, there is only one way, that is the eternal death. And that's why Mahiwal dies, Sohini dies, and that's why Anarkali dies. So, there is an element of what we can say, Ishq and Fana, which is, now of course it is all used in the popular music, but anyway, Ishq and Fana is something which is very, very crucial to, Sufism, and that's what you have it here. So basically it is this ultimate peace or ultimate happiness. That's what Sufism actually goes for. And when you look at this, maybe Sohini-Mahiwal will be a Sufi text in that way, and it is not the story which makes it Sufi. It is the representation which makes it Sufi. So if you sing say Amir Khusru's poetry, you are not exactly a Sufi singer. It's basically you have to sing in the way a Sufi will sing. That's the difference. Next part. So you have, this is from Bundi. It's a very nice illustration. I really like this illustration. You have the ascetic on the lower level and Sohini traveling up and painted cows to show that it is Mahiwal. Of course, it is not Mahesh, it is cows. Bundi mein Mahesh nahi hai, so kya karenge? So they had the cows there. And you have Krishna. Almost the heroes, Mahiwal is almost like sitting like Krishna with the halo. That means again the eternal soul or the great God or whatever, and he is the Jivatma kind of going up and down. And ephemeral union, eternal union, and this will be love, suffering and dejection. This bank. So she is traveling from this bank to the other, and ultimately this will be, end up in death. Next one. So you have pool 1 and 2 represented, pool 4 and 5 represented, pool 3 represented by this way, and the world of pleasures represented by Mahiwal, Sohini representing the individual soul, and river, which is actually represented like a tide. And you have this bands created in Ahmedabad. Actually, I was working on a paper which is on Sarkhej and Ahmedabad relation. Sarkhej is on this side, which is actually made by Ahmad Shah Kaddu, a Sufi saint, and on the other side is Ahmedabad, the city of Ahmedabad, which is made by Ahmad Shah, the emperor. So you have a kind of relation between that. And Ahmad Shah actually asked Ahmad Shah Kaddu, why don't you come and stay in Ahmedabad? He said, no, I would stay here on this bank, you stay on the other bank. So this Sabarmati becomes the river, which is actually represents the time, and you have the realm of dejection, realm of asceticism on this side, and realm of life on the other side, the sansara, whatever you can say, the ordinary life. Next one. So this actually, it almost sounds like I've looked at this particular text and went back to Sohini-Mahiwal. The story is the other way around. I can share it anywhere. So actually, when I looked at Sohini-Mahiwal, I thought this is something which is coming out. And when I got this quote, I was very happy. This is by Ali Asnani. It is the mystic poets writing in Punjabi and Sindhi, however, who refined the technique of reading mystical meanings in the local romances like Heer Ranja, Sansui Punun, and Sohini-Mahiwal. Mahiwal or Mahiwal? Same. The heroine of the story is always search for her lost beloved until she either finds him or dies of thirst and heat in the mountains, like in the case of Heer, I think. Or drowns in Indus, like Sohini. Sohini drowns in Indus. And there is a tomb of Sohini which is, again, we don't know this Sohini and that Sohini, in Karachi, very close to Karachi. There is a tomb of Sohini, which is very close to the Dargah of the Shah Latif Dargah, very close to each other. So it is all that area. So she jumps into Indus. She becomes the parable of the seeking soul on the mystical path who, separated from the divine beloved, has to undergo great tribulation and painful purification process in her quest. This is by Ali Asanani, Sufi poet in the folk tradition of Indo and Pakistan, which is a very nice article if anybody wants to read on Sufism, Sufi poetry in India and Pakistan. It's in JSTOR available. Next one. So, I end this presentation with a quote from Bastami, who quotes Abu Yazid, "Adorn me with thy unity and clothe me with thine oneness, and raise me up to thy oneness, so that when thy creature sees me," that is the ordinary human being, thy actually stands for God, "and they may say, we have seen thee, and thou art that. Yet I, Abu Yazid, will not be there at all." So it is basically the ultimate fana which he is looking at. Thank you very much.
So I am very happy that I am present. You must have probably, do you hear me? Yes. You must have probably presented it elsewhere also. I am very happy that you have done so much work. You showed one of my works. This is not connected, whatever I will say. There may be disjointed points. Firstly, of course, I want to congratulate you. I thought that when, I'm sure many of you may have thought, the male lover takes the initiative. But when woman takes the initiative, the male lover, sorry, I don't know why it happens to me, I'm forgetting. What's that Nayaka called who goes out to meet? Avisa. Avisa. The meaning of Avisa is to go forth. So it is the woman taking the initiative. So I thought that why you have missed that. Since I can see you have done a lot of work on the meaning aspect, interpretation aspect, especially the literature, literary critics are doing. I think somehow the Abhisarika element must be brought in, because she would be Abhisarika. The device she makes, the will she has to go, she has to cross in spite of difficulties, and then makes the device. This is exactly Abhisarika. Unfortunately, I used to read in my young days, Abhisarika is translated often as the flirt. You must have seen. It's so stupid. The next thing was that maybe you were talking about the narrative structure, and you quite rightly compared narrative structure in actual literary work, literary medium, and then the way the painter is devising his narrative structure in the pictorial medium. But at the same time, as in my work on the Jataka stories, I have then focused on the meaning aspect. What I use the term hermeneutic, I have also found Sanskrit equivalents. Right now I cannot recall those names. It's beyond artha, it is not just artha. So you ended up by interpreting. But even in the earlier examples that you have given, So there is what I feel the maybe, because your focus was on Sufi aspect, but there is a lot of Indian involvement in interpretation. So interpretative tradition is very strong, and I thought that maybe in a general way I may make this remark that we think that only when we came to know about this sorry, I am so much semiotics. When we came to know about semiotics, that is in Western literary development of literary criticism, meaning given importance. Incidentally, the concern with meaning which was brought up by literature was also part of the movement against so-called formalism, project in art criticism. But Indian art historians, why didn't realize that we have in our own literary tradition, Indian literary tradition, how much concern there has been for interpretation. So I think while talking of narrativity, we should not forget and also bring in our own tradition of our own interpretation. And that is what I have tried. Has been one. I haven't been able to finish my Jataka stories work. This hermeneutic. So each story is then first the folk stories are also called bodhakatha. So there is a bodh. And
moral stories.
I am not sure if moral and bodh is the same. But the point is, the story is told, as you rightly ended up, by what actually is its interpretation. So even in my Vidur Pandit, in the story is about Vidura, but Vidura there represents the Buddha's intelligence. Again, I am forgetting the term. Prajna. So it represents Buddha's mastery of the Prajna. So anyway, I just thought that this was also an opportunity to talk about the fact that firstly, that narrativity is not simply to tell the story, and we are then going into first very important aspect that visual narrative has a different structure than the time, movement, cinema, and literature. Visual narrative has its own characteristic. But the meaning aspect, it's to convey that meaning. It's not like, because story, that is why in my Jataka stories, I don't want to use the term tale. Ek mazedar kahani, it's not mazedar. So anyway, this is a broad comment. And once again, I'm very happy.
Thanks.
I do have certain observations.
Yeah, please.
Please sit down.
That
way we will be making a
I'm
dialogue.
comfortable standing.
Okay, if you so prefer. I have already been introduced as a man who is interested in cinema very much. And cinema poses problem of visual narration, which cinema can easily solve because it's, after all, time-spanning art. But which painting is not. In painting, the narration does pose very interesting problems. And it's not only now that we are facing those problems. It has been there with the Ajanta painters, it has been there with Michelangelo when he was painting Divine Comedy, budgetary part of the Divine Comedy. Now, and Ajanta had solved it well, so did Michelangelo solve it. And how did they solve their problems? That's very important for us who are talking of narration in terms of visual experience of one point, not over the time. Like in all other narrations, in visual narration also, there should be an initial cause leading to another happening, from initiation to finality. That cause and effect chain should be visible, even if it at one point. That cause and where that cause and effect chain is not visible, there the narration is of lower order. It is depending on another kind of text, be it Sohini-Mahiwal, be it Hira Ranja, or be it Gita Govindas. So, somehow, there, the painter is heavily dependent on a literary text, it says, where the cause and effect chain is not. Look at the very successful visual narrations at one point. How did this hold? In Sistine Mural, Michelangelo does a spiral rhythmic solution. A spiral rhythmic solution is the visual clue to cause and effect relationship. In Ajanta, this is very interesting. There is a suggestion of internal movement through grids. And the grids lead you from one episodic point to another episodic point. And actually, literature late in this day has come back to do certain such things through fractured narratives, through multi-episodic narratives, where there is no sequential, unilinear sequential narration. But there is a multilinearity, but within the multilinearity, there are multiple connections. You have to follow the connective links. Yes. That's in magic realism. While reading a magic realist novel, you do that. The novel leads it. Now, do we find that kind of narrative in the paintings? Hiranja, you also know? Hiranja.
No,
That's Sohini-Mahiwal. Somehow, I felt, looking at those, that there is a huge dependence on the oral tradition.
Yeah.
As if the people viewing this has a pre-exposure to the oral tradition. And they look at the paintings through the prism of the oral tradition.
I think, if I'm supposed to answer, there's no I think those people who looked at this painting are, I mean, as you rightly said, they are very much aware of this story. This Sohini-Mahiwal story was very popular, and that's why I think the painters could do this, I think the experiment, because it doesn't exactly give any this thing about the whole story at all. I mean, there is no, for example, there is no motives given along with Sohini. Like for example, that Pakka pot is not exactly she is the potter's daughter. No, that is not there. So it is not to give any this thing out a narrative element. I mean, that's what I read it as, because people are aware of it. And in Awadh and Rajasthan and all those places, the Sohini-Mahiwal is very, very popular. Because Shah Latif was even, as Ali Asnani will say, Shah Latif was even sung by people, वो folk stories है और ये शाह लतीफ ने उसको एक अच्छा रिदम में डाला है, and the women doing the chakki, they, वो आटा पिसते पिसते गाना गाएंगे. और in Gujarat, I think there is this tradition of road बनाते बनाते गाना गाने का. Or in Karnataka there is this tradition of singing along with even weaving songs are there. And all these songs were actually by this great poet. So they are very much aware of these stories. And so the painter could actually experiment in a different manner. I mean. No, there is no reference. Actually, on Sohini-Mahiwal, the main book on the painting is done by Stephen Markle in Mark volume in 90s. There's a Mark volume, but he doesn't give anything about the patents. But it's all done in 18th century Awadh. That means Faizabad. And there is this kind of Sufi element was there. Because they were, that's very significant for the reason that Awadh and especially Lucknow, when it was made almost like a repetition of, or in the sense it is a kind of replica of Persia. So you have Karbala also, and everything is there in Lucknow. The Badi Imambada and Choti Imambada is actually built like Isfahan. So there is this element of Sufism and Persian, Shiaism, which is there in Awadh. So it's quite significant that most of the paintings are from Awadh. And these stories were very popular among the Shia sects. That's what But I'm quite surprised with Bundi and Rajasthan, because Bundi is not exactly Sufi, known for. Rajasthan is not known for Sufi. Of course, Ajmer is there, and the closest city to Ajmer is Bundi. So that, again, it is, if it is found from Bundi, it doesn't mean that it is painted Bundi. So.
Jayaram, I have just a very short question. First of all, I thank you very much for showing these visuals. They're beautiful. The first question I wanted to...
I like the visuals, that's why I showed you.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Yes. No, one thing is that is there any difference between the Sufi stories in, let's say, in Persia and in India? And if so, what are the differences? Secondly, we have the Bauls around us, and we also have Sufis around us. And when music and songs are a manifestation of their life or their sadhanas, but they don't tell you in a clear language, because this is a esoteric tradition which is based on body. But there are code languages. You have codes there. Yeah. So in all the songs. So once you know about the actual methods of their meditative practices, then you know what they are speaking about. So is there any code, visual codes in these stories? These are two.
Okay, first of all, to answer the question, I am born on Arabian Sea, but I don't know Arabian Sea at all. So Sufism, talking about Sufism is like, I just picked up a glass. Because Sufism is something which is, before talking anything about it, you have to be absolutely into it. I attended a seminar on Sufism, on mysticism, and the Persian scholars were there, and Al-Ghazali, and all those things were there, philosophers. But I have to say that, I happen to be born on Arabian Sea. I don't know about Sufism. But I can give you one reference which I happen to read. Ali Asmani actually talks about the difference between Indian Sufism and Persian Sufism, especially using of heroines. In the sense, Arabian Sufism doesn't use heroines much. Laila Majnun seems to be an exception. He actually talks about this aspect. The representation of the soul is not female representation of the soul, especially in the case of Persian Sufism. There is a lot of difference. And Sufism in India is basically that three main Chistiyas and Naqshbandis. Then there is another set, I don't exactly remember. And it's actually Chistiya Sufism which actually comes in India quite popular. Each one of them have their own coding and all those things. And as far as you said, the codes in painting is concerned, I can't say much because none of the other Sufi, the only Sufi poetry which is written by, this Laila Majnun, that is the representation is there in Persia. Even in Mughal you have representation. But apart from that, that's very surprising that, Hiranja, Shashi Punni, all those stories are not illustrated. Not at all. That's very surprising. And I'm happy that once Dr. Parimu, put on my head this Sohini-Mahiwal, because, that happened to have something, but otherwise I can't say much about it.
Jayaram, I have just one question on Sufism.
Oh no, sir, Sufism, I told you that, I happen to be going into Sufism, but I'm not an expert.
No, all we know, in different parts of northern India especially, Sufism has much to do with music among the Muslims.
Yes.
Otherwise, the Arab Islam doesn't give much importance to music as well.
No, sir, no. The Arabian and huge African,
Wahhabi. Arab Muslim is basically Wahhabi.
We're not talking about Muslims, we're talking about Sufis and Mevlana tradition. It is huge.
No, that's Persian and Turk tradition. That's what my point is, that is basically not Arab, but Persian and Turk.
I don't know Arab or Turk or whatever.
No.
All I'm saying is a Sufi tradition that is coming.
Sufi tradition is basically the Turk and Iranian tradition.
The collection of music, the production of music and the manifestation.
I'm also referring to music. That's very important, but that's not Arab. That's basically Iranian and that's my point. And it's essentially, in fact, in Qawwali also, you can find reference to a concept of hierarchy towards bliss in Qawwali. That concept of hierarchy consists of, first you observe Sariyat, the laws. From there you rise to Hakikat, truth. From there you rise to Marifat. Marifat, only a murshid can rise to Marifat. Marifat is stated. And in Bengal, we have whole lot of Marifati songs. So, do you find any such parallel in painting, doing paintings done on Sufi things?
That's what I said. There are very less paintings done on Sufi things. Like Laila Majnun is the only one I can think about. Like a lot of stories of, say for example, Hajjaj, his works are not represented in Sufism at all. I mean, in paintings. And many times we can actually have, as you rightly pointed out, that it was basically on the music. Because there is this dervishes and there is a whole system. And as far as the music is concerned, the little knowledge I have on music, I think North Africa has a great Sufi music tradition. And there was this French director, Van Cleef, I don't remember his name. He had a documentary, starting from Rajasthan.
Tony Gatler.
Huh?
Tony Gatler.
Yeah. So you have the complete thing going almost touching, Spain, which is a fantastic. And most of those musics are based on Sufism. And Sufism was also very important in Cordoba. Cordoba, which was the center of Islamic learning, and indirectly it influences, Renaissance knowledge or enlightenment element. So, but as far as visual culture is concerned, painting wise, for sculpture to hoga hi nahi, but painting bhi bahut kam hai. But there are architecture which is khankas which is made for them, but none of the khankas has a kind of any decoration or anything like that I can think about. So, visual culture of Sufi visual culture is, I happen to touch on this, and I can say that among the 40 papers which we had for the international seminar, my paper happened to be the only one on painting. Otherwise, it was all on textiles. There's one lady from Uzbekistan who presented on Sufism in textile in Uzbekistan. Otherwise it was.
That's again a Turk area.
Yeah, so visual culture wise, it's not. I don't think it is worked on for. In detail.
This takes us to the need for organizing a seminar, conference on visual culture, musical culture, and Sufism. Anyway, I have two queries. One is with regard to the textual narrative of Sohini-Mahiwal, which I thought I heard that you said that it doesn't have any suggestion of Sufi elements as such. It's a fable, it's a story that is narrated on a normal course of narration. But it's only the painting that these 4 or 5 paintings, it's not a set of paintings. These are not sets of paintings, unlike other, Gita Govinda or other sets of paintings. These are independent paintings which has a similar kind of pattern. And it is through that pattern we are interpreting them as Sufi. Right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
So my question is then that is it possible then to call them Sufi paintings? And in that case, then how do you find a context for those? Just 4 paintings of Sufi paintings in the entire history of Sufism. That seems very very unusual and curious. Very unusual and curious. So that's one clarification that I need. Then second is actually with regard to your presentation that I did not really get, although appreciated and it was nice to see Mr. Parimu's work and other colleagues' work reflected in your previous part of your presentation. But I did not really get to the reason why you had to have that, in relation to this. I needed some understanding.
No, I got it. The first portion, as I said right at the beginning, it was for to introduce the students to the, this narration and visual narration aspect. So that's why the first one.
I did not have an intrinsic connection
to what? No, but so the thing is that I showed that particular thing because where you can look at the visual and the visual and kind of create a story there, but in Sohini-Mahiwal it was not exactly becoming that way. So it was basically to kind of